He was down in New Orleans earlier this week as the Tigers captured their fourth national championship, the first under head coach Ed Orgeron. Dan, good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. What do you make of LSU's magical run this season? The second team to go 15-0 and go through the college football playoff and get a national championship with a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback.
I'm not sure there's any more words than what probably everyone's already said. I think it's impossible to overstate how good that team was this season, and offensively, just the way everything came together, a little bit out of nowhere, just not something we'd ever seen or even necessarily seen hints of at LSU. It just comes together in a way that is spectacular, that it kind of got better almost every single week. And those guys, if there's any team that deserved a national title, it's them, because they played everyone and didn't have too much trouble, really. I mean, there were not – if you think about a football season and teams that win the title, there's usually – several moments of stress, but for LSU, there really weren't that many, and that's a testament to how dominant they were.
What credit do you give to their head coach, Ed Orgeron? I think everybody around here knows of the criticism that you were voicing about the time that he was hired after the accomplishment in 3 years, specifically this one. What are your thoughts on LSU's current head coach?
Yeah, I mean, look, Ed, there were lots of reasons why people doubted that Ed Orgeron could be successful at LSU, and it wasn't anything other than his track record. His track record was terrible. When he was the head coach at Ole Miss, it was the most disastrous tenure in SEC history. And, all credit to him for figuring out what he needed to do to be successful as a head coach. And it didn't necessarily start off great either at LSU. They lost that game to Troy, and he was meddling in the offense, and the Matt Canada thing was weird. And but Ed stuck with it and decided what he wanted to do, and obviously made a great decision to bring in Joe Brady and change the offense and open things up and kind of remove his ego from it. And obviously, when you have a national title, the history is written by the winners. So Ed Orgeron will always be known as a national champion, and regardless of what happened, or anyone, including me and a lot of people and LSU fans and whoever else who didn't think he was going to be up to the job, he clearly proved that he was.
Dan, so you published an article a couple days ago. Opinion, this is the headline. Opinion, LSU booster scandal, barely registering blip on the radar is sign of times. What was the idea behind this article? Like what overall point were you trying to make with it?
Well, when I am at a Final Four or a championship game, I always try to think, the big picture of college athletics, kind of what is this is such an evolving, interesting time in college sports, and I've seen over the course of my time just how attitudes have changed, how the NCAA has been forced to change, and how fans think of things differently now. And it just struck me that, the season began with that news that, frankly, I think outside of Baton Rouge, and it was confirmed by the fact that I wrote the article and the response to it, I mean, no one paid attention to that story at all. It was basically kind of met with a shrug. And, look, let's just face it. I mean, you guys may think differently, but, that is one of the most blatant episodes of cheating that you could have. And it came via a guy who was a criminal, and yet people just kind of shrug their shoulders now, even when there's a story like that. And it's just, like I said, it's just a sign of the times and sort of where we are.
And look, in this situation that you're speaking to is a little bit different, and the timing of it, as you point out in the article, predates Orgeron, and there is jail time being served. But the kind of overall, it just, as you're saying, it just feels like the people have spoken. That this idea that players shouldn't get pieces of the pie, they shouldn't get money in some ways. I just feel like people think they should nowadays. Regardless, it's like if you're not going to give it to them legally, they're going to get it illegally.
Look, there's certainly some of that, and I think people have a level of acceptance of that. But I also think everything changed on whatever it was, November 5th, 2011, when the Jerry Sandusky scandal went public. And ever since then, I mean, you had around that time, the Ohio State thing, you had the Miami thing, it was coming out of USC. and the Reggie Bush sanctions. And whenever one of those stories would hit, people would get all up in arms, and it was like the end of the world when one of those scandals would be revealed. And once Sandusky happened, people just had a very different attitude about, whether it was, Todd Gurley and Johnny Manziel signing autographs. And you've just seen this evolution over time. And now, of course, we're in a place where the NCAA is being pressured to change the rules and name, image, and likeness, and we'll see where that goes. But to me, it just was a good opportunity with LSU playing in the game and the game happening to kind of just take a big picture look and use that as a flashpoint for, something I've always said, which is just that people don't care about this stuff as much anymore.
No, they don't. I mean, they don't seem to care at all. And it's an interesting point you make with Sandusky, but just like for me personally and how I viewed things, I don't even know if that's it. It's just, I think the disconnect of these sports that bring in millions upon millions of dollars while the labor remains like unpaid, I think there is a disconnect there. And I think now people realize that. And like I said, they don't care. And you're seeing how kind of toothless the NCAA is, because anytime they try to go after somebody for something small like this, nobody supports them. They end up with the bad PR. So, I guess my questions are twofold. What do you think should be done? Should players be privy to part of that profit? And what does the NCAA need to do now?
Oh, I've always said that players should be able to profit off name, image, and likeness. And look, I think there's ways you can do it and put some parameters in that make it so that the players themselves can be a little bit protected. I mean, I don't want a system, and I don't think it would be a good idea for a lot of reasons to have a system where, guys like, the Our Lady of the Lake Foundation guy, are paying $180,000 to a player to come to LSU.
Yeah, but Dan, he didn't pay the player. He paid his dad, who was an employee of Our Lady of the Lake. He hired him to work there, and all of the paperwork has been met with compliance. I mean, it was more of a money laundering scheme than it was a cheating for play with football.
Be that as it may, my point is, I think that you don't want boosters kind of, owning players, so to speak. I just don't think that's a good idea. I think if players have opportunities to go out and monetize their likeness, endorse companies, have camps, be affiliated with, proper businesses, there are certain types of things where if it's all done, sort of in the light of day, where it makes a lot of sense. And I think those opportunities should be available. But, the idea that schools would set up certain things with boosters to use in recruiting, I think that gets into an area that actually could be a little bit dangerous. And we can get into that if you want, but I have always been on the side of allowing players to have that right.
It's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, though, right? Because you're kind of mentioning, okay, if you allow players to be paid, then yeah, maybe the boosters get involved. But the black market is almost being created by the fact that you're not allowing players to be paid, and that's actually leading boosters to doing the exact thing, right? So, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, the black market is there and has always been there, and in some ways may continue to be there. But that to me is a different issue altogether from just what is right about allowing people who have the opportunity to go make money the same rights as everyone else on campus. To me, that's a totally separate issue. So that's what I'm in favor of.
Dan, thank you for your time this morning, man.
All right, thanks.
Dan Wolken checking in this morning from USA Today.